Eric Patrick Clapton was born on March 30th, 1945 in Ripley, Surrey, England. His childhood began with a secret. He grew up believing his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his sister. When the truth surfaced, it marked him deeply, and you can hear that ache and searching in the way he plays and writes. As a boy, he fell under the spell of the blues, wearing out records by Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and B.B. King. Those sounds didn't just shape his style. They gave him an artistic identity, someone who could fuse the soul of American blues with the edge of British rock. Clapton first broke through in the early 1960s with the Yardbirds, a leading light of the British blues boom. Even as success arrived, he balked when the band shifted toward a more pop-oriented sound. In 1965, he walked away, choosing musical truth over easy sales. That insistence on authenticity became a lifelong signature. He found a new home with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, where his fiery tone and impeccable touch earned him the nickname Slow Hand. The legend only grew in 1966 when he co-founded Cream with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. The trio stretched rock to its limits: heavy blues, long improvisations, and psychedelic color on songs like Sunshine of Your Love and White Room. Cream burned hot and fast, imploding after 2 years, but the impact crowned Clapton as a global guitar hero. After Cream, he helped form Blind Faith with Steve Winwood, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gretsch. They released just one record, yet left behind Can't Find My Way Home, a classic of late 60s longing. Restless as ever, Clapton also linked up with Delaney and Bonnie, then forged Derek and the Dominoes, whose 1970 album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs became a landmark. Its title track, Layla, was born from his secret aching love for Pattie Boyd, then married to his friend George Harrison. That riff and that raw emotion still feel like an open nerve. The heights came with a price. In the 1970s, Clapton fell hard into heroin, then alcohol, habits that nearly erased the man behind the myth. He clawed his way back, with help from friends and a stubborn will to live. That honesty about addiction changed how people saw him. Beneath the guitar god was a human being trying to survive. The 1980s brought reinvention and heartbreak. In 1991, his 4-year-old son Connor died in a tragic accident. From that grief came Tears in Heaven, a gentle hymn that carried his pain to listeners who'd suffered their own losses. It became one of his most loved songs, proof that the same hands that could roar could also comfort. Across decades, Clapton made music with the giants, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, J.J. Cale, and B.B. King among them. He slid easily between blues, rock, pop, and reggae. Just listen to his timeless cover of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff. Variety kept him current. The blues kept him honest. Clapton's personal life has always braided itself into his music, and nowhere more than in his bond with George Harrison. The two guitarists recognized something in each other: taste, restraint, devotion to song, and became true friends. Clapton stepped into Beatles history on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, adding a searing solo to Harrison's elegy, and the pair spent long stretches trading ideas, pushing one another, and chasing sounds that felt new. Underneath that camaraderie, a private storm gathered. Clapton fell in love with Pattie Boyd, the model and muse behind Harrison's Something, his longing for her, impossible, then all-consuming, poured straight into Layla. Years later, Harrison and Boyd divorced in 1977. Free of her marriage, Boyd and Clapton finally made their relationship official. On 27th of March 1979 in Tucson, Arizona, they married, seemingly closing one of rock's most talked about triangles. Marriage, though, brought its own trials. They dreamed of a family but endured devastating losses, including repeated miscarriages. In 1984, they turned to in vitro fertilization, then a draining, uncertain process, which also ended in heartbreak. Under that weight, Clapton made choices that would change everything. He began a relationship with Italian model and actress Lori Del Sano. Their son, Connor Clapton, was born on 21st August 1986, a joy for his father, but a blow that shattered the marriage. Pattie learned the truth and by 1989 they divorced. A great love story ended quietly, heavy with what might have been. Then came the loss no parent should face. On the 20th of March 1991, at just 4 years old, Connor fell from an open window on the 53rd floor of a Manhattan building. Clapton was undone. He turned that grief into Tears in Heaven, a song that offered a father's sorrow and a fragile hope of reunion. It spoke to millions and became a lasting part of his legacy. Years later, healing found him. In 1998, after a performance in Columbus, Ohio, he met Melia McInerney, then 22, working as an administrative assistant. They dated privately for a year, went public in 1999, and discovered a steadiness Clapton had long lacked. On the 1st of January 2002, they married in a modest ceremony at St. Mary Magdalene Church in Ripley, back where his story began. Together they built the family he had yearned for, raising 3 daughters who brought light after years of turmoil. Now 80, Clapton has started speaking with unusual openness about what George Harrison meant to him. He doesn't just call George a friend. He calls him a brother, a kindred spirit, and quietly a rival. Their styles were different. Clapton, the combustible bluesman. Harrison, the melodic craftsman with a spiritual core. But the respect between them never wavered. Clapton remembers late nights at George's home, passing a guitar back and forth, laughing at blown licks, nudging each other toward better choices. He also admits to the wound at the center of their story, his love for Patty. I couldn't help how I felt, he says now. I loved her with everything I had, and I think George knew long before anyone else. Lesser friendships would have broken. Somehow, theirs did not. Clapton confesses to guilt over that period, acknowledging George was hurt, and then emphasizes what defined Harrison most: forgiveness. Even after Patty left and later married Clapton, the two men kept making music together. To outsiders, it looked impossible. To them, music bridged what life had cracked. That bond only deepened when George became ill. When George was sick, I visited whenever I could, Clapton recalls. We didn't need many words. After Harrison died in 2001, Clapton organized concert for George the next year, a radiant memorial filled with humor, devotion, and the songs George left behind. It remains one of Clapton's proudest undertakings. Looking back, he believes Harrison changed him more than almost anyone. I played with so many great musicians, Clapton says, but George was special. He wasn't trying to outplay you. He was trying to make something beautiful. At 80, he speaks of George with pure tenderness. The rivalry, the triangle, the noise, all of it falls away. What remains is love. George had this light, Clapton says. Even when things were dark, he carried peace. I miss him every day, and I'll never stop. For years, the brilliance of Clapton's guitar lived in the shadow of addiction. The 1970s were especially brutal. First heroin, then alcohol, threatening to erase everything he'd built. In 1982, he made the turn that saved his life. He quit drinking and left recreational drugs behind. It wasn't quick and it wasn't easy. It was a daily battle, and it gave him back his music. One habit lingered: nicotine. Clapton smoked heavily for decades, even after finding sobriety. Only in 1994 did he crush his last cigarette. In its own way, that decision completed the circle, a final break with the past and a quiet promise to the future. That arc, from addiction to recovery, from loss to renewal, doesn't turn him into a saint. It turns him into something truer, a man who refused to let his gifts or his life disappear. His story shows how endurance and choice can lead to a second act, and how survival can sometimes be the most creative act of all. Over time, Clapton proved he could move in almost any musical world and still sound like himself, whether trading licks with B.B. King, finding hush and groove with J.J. Cale, or reshaping reggae on I Shot the Sheriff. The variety kept him fresh. The blues kept him grounded, and through it all, fame, scandal, grief, forgiveness, one friendship remained a compass. Eric Clapton and George Harrison didn't just share stages. They shared a standard: serve the song, tell the truth, and leave something beautiful behind. At 80, Clapton is finally saying it out loud. The rivalry makes the headlines. The love is what lasted.